Hello and welcome. In this video I'll be demonstrating our Infinite Basins tool for ArchiCAD. As the name suggests, this tool is capable of being configured to an infinite number of basin types, and generally you can create any basin within a couple minutes. Let's take a look at the interface. We have our first page, which just basically provides a link to our website by clicking on this image, or you can ask us a quick question. On the next page we have our component catalogs and assemblies page. This is where you can define and store individual components of basins, waste and taps, and then combine these into an assembly. I'll get into that in a bit more detail shortly. You can also use this page for navigation. For instance, if I want to navigate to the basin configuring page, I just click on define. In here we have a series of options to help us define our basin. Let me just expand the dialog so that we can see our basin. So here you can see I've selected a semi-recessed basin. We have 5 different mounting types: above counter, under counter, semi-recessed, wall hung and freestanding. We then choose our basin shape and profile and our bowl shape and profile. We can then also nominate a recess. This is not quite configured to this tool yet, but you can see how it cuts a little recess in the top. We also then have an option for the overflow in the basin. Once you have defined the shape of your basin, you then go to the next page, which is your waste configuration. We have some generic types of plug, push, pull and a basket waste, and obviously to turn the waste off altogether, and then you can determine your sizes. We also have the option for a bottle trap, which we can turn on, and also nominate the size and positioning. Once you've defined your waste, we then go into the tap configuration. Now, at the moment in this part, tap configuration really only refers to the holes. We don't have a built-in tap in this object yet, but once the infinite taps is built, then it will be included in this object also. From the taps, we have a series of specification data covering IFC and Kobe parameters. This is based on the MBS standards, but will be updated once the Australian standards have been set. From there we just go to the typical 2D and 3D representation parameters. Okay, so let's configure a basin. Go back to our basins. Now I want to set up a few standards in this tool so it's easy to access. So this is my first standard that I want to apply. So it's a semi-recessed basin. There's also this bench feature where you can turn on and off an extended bench that follows the curve of the basin. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is make sure I've got all my sizes and shapes right. I've configured this earlier so I know this is correct. So I've chosen my semi-recessed rectangular basin. I've set the radius to 60 mil. So that's the radius of these corners here. I've defined a straight profile with just a chamfer on the top and bottom. So if we have a closer look at that. And I've adjusted those radiuses. So the top radius is a 5 mil radius and the bottom radius is a 70 mil radius. I could keep that at 5 mil and then we'd have a really squared off basin. But that's not what I'm after at the moment. I've nominated the rectangular bowl. We could put any shaped bowl in here. I could do an elliptical bowl, but that doesn't quite look right. So I'm just going to go back to my rectangular bowl. And then I've got to make sure I set these radiuses and the offset. So you can see this is the position of the bowl, offsetting from the left and the front. So we've got a 10 mil offset, so therefore we know that this radius needs to be 50 mil, as in 60 minus 10 mil. If I wanted to offset that a little more, then it would probably make sense to adjust the size as well and adjust my radius. Okay, now I have the bowl the way I want it. I want to store this bowl. I want to store this bowl so I can use it later, and I want to name it in a certain way. So what I'm going to do, I can go back to my components catalog page and I can do that here. So I can name this bowl, because it's going to be a generic and not a product specific. I'm going to call it Gen, got to be quick, square, semi-recessed. Now all I have to do to save this basin is to hit store. However, we have the option to set an image. I can set this to no image if I do not care for an image and hit store. Then when I go and select my basin, which you can now see here in this drop down menu, there it is, just the description, no image. In this example, I actually saved an image. Let me show you how that's done. All you need to do is create the image file. So if I go back to my Gen Square as a preset, go undefined, hit custom here, and then I just type in the image file. Now if this is a product specific element, you can get the image file from the website, from the manufacturer's website. If not, you can just create the image yourself. So I'll just do that. Click OK. There's my basin. Save as. This is the one that I saved previously, so I'm just going to overwrite that. before I do that, I might just copy that so I have it ready to paste. Hit save, yes. To get that image in, you need to reload libraries, although that one was created prior to this, so it would already be here, but typically you'd have to reload the libraries to bring that image in. Go back into the tool, paste that image file name there, and hit store. Now when I go back down to my gen square, you can see it's got an image for it. Now it's a little hard to see, so you might want to adjust that image after you've created it. There's a certain size to this element, which is 84 by 64 pixels. So if you do a multiple of 84 by 64, you'll get a nice proportioned image. So if I go back into my folder where I've saved that image, I want to crop this. I want it to be a little bit closer to that. Also, you've got to consider the file size when you're doing this. So it's obviously best to have the image smaller than rather than larger. Okay, so a multiple of 84 by 64, if I do a resize, so if I do 84 times 5, which is 420, now I want to get my 64, so that's 320, so I'll just stretch this down to 320, or thereabouts. Go back into the tool, and now you can see the image looks a lot nicer. Okay, let's create another basin. Set this to undefined, click define. Now I want to do an elliptical basin above counter. So I'm going to select my above counter. I'm going to select an ellipse and an ellipse here too. We need to nominate a rim height. For this, I'm going to set it to the same height as the overall. Okay, and that gives me my ellipse. Now I want to adjust this. Instead, I want this profile. Set the main radius to something a little bit more suitable. We'll have a look at that in 2D and we'll go and adjust our bowl. So for this bowl, we probably want to adjust our size a little bit here, just to get it to a nice, and we go down to say 280, and we might reduce the size of this one as well. Okay, so there's our round bowl. Very quick and very easy to make. You can see that when you select the certain shapes, you get a guide down here down the bottom that shows you that shape. If I just reduce this and expand this a little bit so you can see all that, these are your guides to tell you what the different values mean. So for instance, if I set this to the 8 arcs function, you get a different guide down here that tells you where all those values come from. Okay, so now I want to store this one. I can go back to my components, or if I've got enough room, I can just come down here and store it down here. You can see that you also have the material and pen settings down here. So this one, I can call it generic ellipse, and this is our above counter. So I'll call that AC. Now obviously I don't want this rectangular image file. For now, I'm not really worried about the image file, so I'm just going to select that to no image. The reason there's a no image option in there is because although this is created in ArchiCAD 19, in ArchiCAD 20 and 21 you get an error message if the image is not available. So I've created a no image. Okay, so let's store this. Store. Let's go back to our components. Now we can select between our square, I'll just expand this, or the ellipse we just created. We can also do this exact same process with the waist and with the taps. I'm going to do a couple of these with the waist because there's a few I want to store. This is a general waist, so I'm using the plug option. So I'm going to store that. So I'm going to call this gen plug. I'm not worried about an image for this one either, so I'm just going to hit store. Now if we refresh, you now see that that gen plug has gone into our list. If we want to clean this list up, we can also delete items from this list. Before I do that, I want to create a bottle trap. So I'm just going to turn a bottle trap option on, and I'm going to call this gen bottle trap and hit store. Once again, a quick refresh, and now you can see we've got the gen bottle trap in there. So we can go to the plug, or we can go to the bottle trap. So now after those quick configuration options, I can very easily, via my component catalogs, because that's where I prefer to work, I can select any of the basins that I created, and I can also assign any of the weights that I've created for those. I can also do the same thing with taps. We also have the options to store 2D representation settings. So if I go into the 2D view of this, I'll just go to my 2D page. We have a couple of different pens here. So we have the main pen, which should probably be pen 4, and we have the minor pen, which includes the bowl. So you can have bolder and lighter pens. So let's do the bowl at just a grey, just so it looks different. Now I can store this. I can store this as the CAD Swift 2D, and this will be my default 2D. I'll hit store, quick refresh, and now you can see I have access to that setting here. So I could jump to the old one I did, or I could jump back to that one quite easily. Just want to go back to the basin settings. So you can see that's all now locked. because I've applied those predefined settings. If we go back to component catalogs and I set this to undefined, then obviously all that is now unlocked and you can now configure that. I've done a fair bit of testing on this, and this basin tool will cover 95% of basins available on the market today and will enable you to create those in a couple of minutes. So rather than waiting for a manufacturer to produce content for you, you can just produce your own really quickly, and then you can import their specification data into your own tool. Okay, so one of the really clever aspects of the component catalogs feature that I would like to demonstrate here, I'm just going to set that back to undefined, is how you can use this to control a project. If all our basins are going to be the square semi-recessed on the project, then rather than saving it as a square semi-recessed, let's just redefine that. Go to undefined. So we've got all those same settings still there. Instead, we're going to call this project basin 01. And we're going to hit store. So just need a refresh before that appears in the list. You just do that by changing page, change it back again. So there's our project basin 01, and it is exactly the same as our generic square basin. So we'll select that and we'll go place that all around the project. So we've got, say, 30 or 40 units, and we place the basin everywhere. Now, let's say the client says, I don't want the square semi-recessed anymore. I want to go to a round above counter. So quite simple, select the generic ellipse above counter. As you can see, the waist position is slightly affected by that. The automatic aspect has been overridden. So if we go back to that waist, we come in here and we set that to undefined. Just watch this value here, undefined. It jumps back up into the position that it should be, and then we hit store, and now that Z position is saved. I might actually take that Z position out of it, seeing as though it's locked value, and then we won't have to keep redefining this element. Okay, let's go back to our components. So now we've got a general ellipse. Click OK. Great, we've changed one bowl. That doesn't help us. Go back in, hit undefined. Now, if we recreate this as project basin 01, so let's just type project basin 01, just make sure that's the exact same name, project basin 01, project basin 01, and we hit store. Now all of a sudden, when we go to project basin 01, it has become our elliptical above counter basin. So then when I click OK here, then if I go into my GDL and I go run parameter script on all placed objects, wait a couple seconds, now all my bases have been converted automatically to the new project basin 01. Likewise, if I select all the basins and open and close their settings, they convert to the new description of product basin 01. So not only will this basin allow you to quickly model any manufacturer's basin, it will also allow you to control those basins at a project level. The other important feature is that this storing of data has restricted access. If I remove this password up here, I am no longer able to define and store basins. I am merely able to select. This will enable a whole new level of quality control that will eliminate user error. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and I also hope that you look forward to using our Infinite Basin tool for ArchiCAD. Ta.